Hello and welcome to the Embracing the Mystery podcast, hosted by yours truly, Danny Rem. This is a podcast where we have expansive conversations around living an empowered and embodied soul-led life, expanding your consciousness and belief systems, what it means to fully embrace the mystery of life that we are all living, and so much more. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a rating or review wherever you listen. Share it on your social media platforms, like and subscribe. Thank you for being here and enjoy. Hello, beautiful human beings, and welcome to episode 3 of the Embracing the Mystery podcast. I am so excited to share this episode with you all because it is on one of my favorite topics, dolphins and whales, and their role here on planet Earth and how they are here to assist in the evolution of humanity's consciousness. So there is so much that we can learn from them, whether it be spending time with them physically in the waters or going into a meditative space, opening our channels to receive their teachings and informations and frequencies. And this is something that my dear friend who I interviewed for this episode, Amber Herzog, and I have been exploring together for the last couple of years on Maui. So Amber is an incredible artist, a poet, a performer, a film writer, and she finds her inspiration through nature and focuses on inspiring others to also reconnect with nature through her art. So, in this episode, we talk about our personal experiences of communing with the dolphins and the whales, what they have personally taught us, and their role in supporting the evolution of humanity's consciousness. Welcome, Amber, to the Embracing the Mystery podcast. I'm so excited to see you and just be here with you today and have a conversation about dolphin and whales with someone who I know is so deeply connected to these creatures and the ocean and just all of planet Earth.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jenny. I love sharing it with you. I know that you also have such a deep connection with and passion for the dolphins, and um, when you're lucky enough to spend time with them underwater and interact with them and really seek to understand them, it's so exciting to share that with other people. So appreciate it. I got talking with you.
It's so exciting. And I'm curious if you want to just dive right in and begin to share a little bit about your journey, like how you came to come into deeper connection with the dolphins and whales and what that's been like for you.
Yes, I would love to share. I started dreaming about and trying to be a whale and a dolphin as a child, because they just embodied such a fun way of being. Like, if you had to have fun in a body, how amazing does it look to like leap out of the ocean and twist and flip and be able to use your tail and have such speed and agility? It
Mm.
just looks like so much fun to be in that body. So that's how I started thinking about and feeling a connection with them when I was a little kid. And I would try to teach myself to breach and to dive under waves and to move like they did underwater. And then that became the beginning of my love for the ocean too. So as we grew up together, I started encountering them in new ways in the water, when I was swimming or when I was kayaking. And once I was lucky enough to start seeing them face to face, I just felt so eager for more because every time I met them underwater, it felt like a conversation and a deeper learning. And I love things that have endless learning, like yoga and meditation and uh, self-discovery. So learning about dolphin consciousness has become part of that journey too, about learning about how we function and
Mm.
about our relationship with planet Earth, which is really important to me because my mission as an artist and as a human is to help inspire people back into closer connection with nature for the
Mm.
purposes of having a more reciprocal, loving relationship with our planet, where we are investing in her well-being because we rely on her. And I
Mm.
really feel that whales and dolphins are a key part of that. So that's what I've been exploring when I spend time with them.
I love that. And I so agree that they are just such a key piece of that remembrance and that bringing us back to the earth. And they hold like such specific codings for that, for turning us back towards like the truth within and also this like deeper connection to all of life. And I'm curious, is there a specific moment that you've had with a whale or a dolphin that has really like facilitated that for you? Or something that was like really profound that opened your eyes?
The thought that stops me in my tracks every time when I think about that, um, and I'll close my eyes to speak it because I feel it so deeply, um, that every whale that's alive on our planet um, was raised by its mother and learned everything it knows from its mother. And she, in turn, learned everything she knows from her mother. And on and on and on in this completely unbroken line of matrilineal wisdom that stretches back across a really healthy, vibrant history where they've roamed all over every ocean of planet Earth for somewhere around 35 to 40 million years
Mm.
as they are now. They're one of the most long-lived, big-brained thinking creatures on our planet. They are actually. And they're not one of, they are. And our human brains and bodies have only been in this form for 100,000 years, maybe. And so we are so new to this planet compared to them. And they were wisely keeping the oceans in balance and flourishing as some of the largest, highest, most thinking, feeling life forms on the planet. So they are wise. And when I think about that every time, it just like completely humbles me in a way where I want to learn to be in a deeper, different relationship with Earth and with the oceans.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so incredible to know like the numbers and the science behind it.
Mm.
Because just from my time in the water with the dolphins and the whales and feeling how evolved their consciousness truly is just through simple like energetics, but to know that there's actually like truly like they have been around for so long, like it's a legit fact that they are such evolved creatures on our planet.
Yes, and relating to each other differently because each family of whales thinks and feels differently. They all function slightly differently in the way that they feed and relate to each other and communicate and their family dynamics. You know, each species is different. And
Mm.
so they culturally come together like we do, like humans from different continents, whales of different species come together and they're like, oh, you do this differently. They learn about each other and they spend time together. That's really interesting to me. And then within each species, they each have their own language. That's really exciting to me. Yeah, just there's so many similarities to how they function as a body of consciousness, so much like humans do.
Totally. And I love that you're bringing that in too, because that is something that I learned so much from the dolphins because I really recognize that they have something I like to call pod mentality.
Yeah.
It's like this mentality of community and like looking out for each other and moving together. You know, when you see them swimming in a pod, they're all like kind of going at the same pace. And I've even heard that they have specific names through like certain squeaks and
Mhm.
frequencies that they emit.
Yeah.
And also just to bridge the connection between the dolphins and the whales and community in that way. I also know that, and maybe you have something to say on this, that the dolphins are considered the midwives for the humpback whales, and that
Mm.
they will like circle the whales when they're giving birth to their babies to protect them
Mhm.
from any harm from sharks or anything like that. So I love that these two creatures are so similar yet so different in their wisdom and their frequencies on
Yeah.
certain levels.
Yeah. I have seen some photographic and video evidence of whales and dolphins behaving together at times of birth, with dolphins specifically circling around
Hmm.
whales uh, at some speed, apparently, and providing some sort of energetic and physical barrier. I don't know how consistently that happens, but it does seem that we've seen it recorded recently, I think several times. So I'm curious about that. We know that whales and dolphins protect other species from sharks on occasion. There's specific stories and evidence and videos of people being protected,
Yeah.
seals being protected, dolphins being protected. What, yeah. I, I know people who have interacted with dolphins and sharks in the water at the same time. Who've actually been in the Hawaiian waters, swimming when they were approached by a dolphin that was being chased by a shark.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so they actually became part of that.
Before it was illegal, when I used to swim with them in Maui, I
Yeah.
used to go like way out to swim with the pod, and people would be like, "Are you afraid of sharks? Like, what if something happens?" And I'm like, "No, like if I'm with the dolphins, I feel like I'm completely protected by the sharks."
It's the safest place. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Thinking about that pod mentality, I so clearly identify with that and feel that when I'm with them. That's one of the primary lessons that I've experienced from the dolphins specifically, is that when you're underwater with them, you can feel how they sense each other. Their bodies are aware of all the other bodies underwater, and they know where they're moving, how they're moving, and they also know a lot about their energetic state. You know, they're tuned into each other energetically and emotionally. And so they're really reading each other's energetic fields and moving that way when they're underwater. And you can see it. And they'll come to you and they'll map out your field, right? They'll get in your energetic field and come and get in your
Totally.
face and look at you and check you out. And you can feel them feeling you with their whole body.
100%.
You
Yes.
know, they kind
And
of shape like a lens and aim at you.
yes, I actually had an experience of this that I want to share, but I also want
Ooh.
to make a point to give this a word that I've read before called telepathy. Telepathy that also comes from empathy through like the feeling. And that dolphins are very much capable of this and tuned into this, and that we can also, and I'm sure whales too, that we can also receive things from them when we are like opening our channels and like desiring to connect with them. And I had this experience once when I was swimming with them. So there was like no dolphins in the water, and then all of a sudden a huge pod showed up and they were like coming right at me. And they looked at me and I realized I got scared because I was like the only one out there. And it was just like so many dolphins at once. And I like kind of froze and they totally felt it. And then they shifted and they started going in the other direction. And I was like, wow, they like felt my fear and were like conscious of it and wanted to respect it and totally went in the other direction. So yeah, they are so attuned and it's so beautiful.
It's really interesting. I mean, you can see it and sense it in the water, how they're communicating beyond words. They're clearly using sound of all kinds at the same time, which is interesting.
Hmm.
They'll whistle and click and squeak and interweave all of that using different parts of their body. But they know how to move together, and they also then feel each other and feel each other's health and well-being, so that when one of them is injured or ill, all of them are injured or ill, right? Like they're only as well as their least well member of their pod because they choose to move together. That's one thing that I learned when I was diving deeper into whale and dolphin consciousness. I was working on a project called Sounds of the Ocean, where I was really trying to and was writing poetry from the perspective of the dolphin and the perspective of the whale. And I learned through a really beautiful film made by a friend of mine named Ran Levy Yamamori, who's the film's called Bridging Troubled Waters, and it's about the pilot whale hunts. And it unlocked my understanding of how committed those animals are to each other, because in that example of the whale hunts, that's what's used against them, is that they will not separate, because for them to separate from their pod means death. Not because they can't really survive, like they could survive, but they don't want to be alone.
That's so powerful and such a beautiful example too, like especially right now in our world with the division and the things that
Yes,
are happening, how the illusion of separation is driving so many decisions and even just thought forms and other consciousnesses on our planet, how it's really not working. It's really causing destruction. And yeah, like the whales and the dolphins really have those codes of community and how it is so important that we work together and that we take care of each other and that we are attuned to each other and how much more is possible, how we can be so much more successful when we are working together and combining our energy in a way that's like creative and not destructive, you know? So that's
totally.
so, so beautiful.
And I use that exact feeling and message to inform a poem that I wrote called The Pod, which is really beautiful. And it's about exactly that. It's about what could we do if we chose to move together? If we choose to actually sense into each other's needs and abilities and try to create some sort of balance so we can all thrive. That is possible in so many ways,
Yeah,
even if it's not perfect. um, and yeah, it's a beautiful, vibrant little poem. I've recorded a couple versions of it. I'd love to share one with you if you want to share it here. But
absolutely.
it's really beautiful. And thinking about that drive, which is called for whales and dolphins, it's the same thing as we call it for humans, that we are obligatorily social. A human baby cannot grow to be an adult without help, without family, without a
Right.
pod. And the same is true for dolphins. And that need and drive to be together and to be in community and to be in relationship and to touch each other and to play together and to rest together and to mate together and to talk together is part of what makes them want to live. And that's
Mhm.
also what made me realize the pain of dolphin captivity, you know? And when that really hit me when I was doing this work, I made a pilgrimage to see the orca in captivity um, at SeaWorld San Diego and spent a full day there with them and spent hours with them, including face to face up close above the barriers with some of the keepers there and heard them talking and watched them react to us and have a conversational exchange with us. And it just makes me realize how painful it is for them to be alone.
Like, what were you
The
picking up
whale
on?
activity was trying to be a human. It had learned how to do human things. It had learned how to wave. It had learned how to make very specific kinds of eye contact. It learned to shoot water at us, to squeak in response. Orca can articulate human sounds and human words. They
Uh-huh.
can articulate simple syllable words. There's footage circulating right now that shows a captive orca um, repeating 15 or 20 simple human words. Had they been trained by whales, they would be wild and they would also be free to live such a happy, vibrant, fueled
Yes.
life. An orca in captivity, in the wild, orca dive to 300 feet on the regular to hunt. And in captivity, an orca can't dive past 30 feet, you know? In the wild, in most places, orca are living at water temperatures from very tippy top 70, but mostly down around 50 to 40 degrees.
Mm.
And in captivity, they're often living in water that's 80 degrees for their whole lifetime.
Mm.
And understanding this about them also has given me much greater empathy for humans. It also makes me realize the pain of humans being isolated, whether they're in literal captivity, which is a very real thing that we do, it makes me think so differently about that and realize how inhumane humans
Right.
can be to each other.
Yeah, we really do need each other. And with the shift that's happening on our planet, for that shift to happen, we really do need to come together in a harmonic way, which is also, so related to the dolphins and the whales. And I just have to make a comment about the orcas because I remember seeing all these videos going viral. I think it was at some point last year, and it was of these orcas attacking boats, and like the
Right?
boats were sinking. And honestly, like I was like, yeah, like nature's fighting back, like finally. And I just got a kick out of that. I don't know if
That's
that's
true.
why it was happening, but
So many people did. So many people loved that that was happening, right? And we're cheering them on, and it was funny and it was engaging. And so many people asked me, "Well, why do you think they're doing that?" Um, I'm like, because they're being threatened. These boats have shown up in their waters for 300 years, taken all their fish, poured all kinds of trash and toxic stuff into the water, and then are just like crawling everywhere. Can you imagine if your home was just like overtaken in that way?
yeah, you would fight back.
You're trying to defend your family and raise your babies there.
It's
I
like the
mean,
natural response.
yeah. And also thinking about as a different way of being, how can we honor that? How can we understand that? Okay, now that we understand that's what they're doing, what could we do to respect them better? Instead of thinking that we're competing, which is the way that those in power have always chosen to deal with
Uh-huh.
nature is as a competition, right? If a predator is eating my sheep, got to kill it. And here the orca and all the whales, for that matter, have been tolerating our not only our presence for hundreds of years, but we also humanity tried to systematically destroy them.
That is like one example of nature fighting back, but I really feel it happening on such a massive scale right now, where just like Mother Earth is really speaking to us in a big way, like asking us to wake up and begin to listen to her again and to come back into harmony with her cycles, her frequencies, her energies, her way of being. And
Yeah.
yeah, the whales are one example, but it's happening on such a large scale.
I agree. And I really, when I have tuned into the orca specifically, because in part of my practice of working with them is going deep into creative space with them, going deep into meditation and deep into journey space where I'm having a deeper exchange with them at an energetic level or a spiritual level.
Mhm.
And whenever I have shared space with the orca, the absolute upfront feeling is just fierce, maternal, protective energy. No bullshit. Very nurturing to their babies and very giving, very tolerant, very beautiful, very playful, but also capable of complete destruction. And I'm
Yeah.
all about that vibe.
We need the
But that is
Kali
what the orca,
energy.
but that is what also what the orca are teaching me and are teaching us is that that is so necessary because yes, Mother Earth is bountiful and giving and forgiving, but how
Mhm.
far do we think we can go? She's saying no.
And I love that you're bringing this up. This is something I was hoping we could talk about today. Is that, well, it's interesting because you are so connected to the whales and the dolphins, but I feel like maybe you're more connected to the whales than I am, and maybe I'm a bit more
Yes.
plugged in with
I
the
feel that.
dolphins.
Yeah.
And to me, you're just like such a powerful mama. Like you have this like fierce mother energy. And I wonder if you could talk more about that with the whales because that is really what I feel from them as well. And
Mhm.
I don't know the exact like statistic, but I know that when they have their babies, then they're like not eating right, but they are still like producing milk for the
Right.
babies. Do you
Right.
know what I'm getting at? Can you expand on it?
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of what they're capable of with their bodies of feeding and caring for their babies.
Yeah, and just that like I feel like it's a beautiful representation of the sacrifice that a mother makes of her body. Like
Yeah.
also like the human mother and like the Mother Earth of like giving all the resources to the child and
Right.
not expecting anything in return.
Yeah, and also where I am with my particular journey in my lifetime and in my journey with feminine consciousness, because that has been a many lifetimes journey for me, is that I am recognizing that every body has its limits. We're here in human bodies and our bodies have limits. And a mother who is depleted cannot raise healthy children. So we
Hmm.
have to take care of the mother because we need the healthy children, because we all want healthy children. Like, that's so important to us. So yeah, and learning that with them. I mean, just thinking about humpbacks specifically, humpbacks in the South Pacific spend half of the year in Antarctica, and they swim from the poles all the way to the equator to give birth. When you're talking about big whales, the humpbacks have some of the longest migrations, and their pregnancy is over a year long, and they nurse a baby for over a year,
Hmm.
and they do all their feeding in Antarctica, just like gulping up mass amounts of krill and of fish, small fish especially, and they gather all their nutrients and calories for the entire year over a few months of feeding. And then while they're pregnant, they migrate all the way to the warm waters of the equator, thousands of miles, give birth somewhere along the way, or there if they're lucky, but usually it's somewhere along the way, and then nurse and care for a newborn at warmer temperatures for months, a baby whale that drinks hundreds of gallons of milk a day.
Right. It's insane.
For months, all while she's getting no food. I think I heard a statistic the other day from a shark scientist that whale blubber has 4,000 calories a pound. I mean, again, just back to the science of like the mama whale is taking that many calories from her body and putting it into the baby and growing the baby that big. And I wonder what the weight difference is, like how much she loses and how much the baby gains, you know?
Right. Yeah. Gosh, even just seeing like the baby whales in Maui, like they're babies, but they're still huge. Whales are just massive creatures.
Yeah, yeah, they are. And especially, I mean, a huge step of igniting not only my passion, but my understanding for whales was spending time underwater with them. Once I spent time underwater, in 2019, I traveled to the Kingdom of Tonga and spent 5 days in the ocean, face to face with different humpback whales under lots of different conditions, including mating, including resting, including swimming really fast across open ocean, including resting perfectly still in shallow bays. Got to see some newborn calves and breaching and be up close and in the water with all of this different behavior. Just like being underwater with the dolphins, you're feeling their consciousness. Being underwater with the humpback whales, you're feeling their consciousness, but it's a very different frequency from the dolphins.
Totally.
It's
Yeah.
so big and it's so quiet until it isn't anymore and they start making noise. And then that sound there's something about that sound that transforms our bodily experience.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, about
Please.
the sounds of the dolphins and the whales and how this has the ability to not only heal our physical bodies and shift our energetic fields, but also our consciousness. And even as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of this story where there was a child, I'm not in like full true remembrance, but
Yeah.
it was something like a child had some sort of like disability, like mental disability or learning challenge or something like that. And then they started bringing the child to the dolphins and it like totally turned it around or it got much better. I can't remember exactly the article, but it was something along those lines. And I have even had this experience when I first got to Maui and I first started swimming with the dolphins. I remember I had been so stressed about something and my body was in so much pain. And I went out with the pod, and when I got out of the water, I was so still in my consciousness, and all the pain and tension and density that had been locked up in my physical body was completely gone. Their frequencies are just so, so powerful. Just being with them, like their energy that they embody, but also the sounds that they're
Yeah.
emitting.
I mean, as you know, I have studied whale and dolphin sound professionally since 2019, since being underwater with them, and uh, wrote a documentary film called Ocean Souls, where I helped to explore the intelligence and emotions and family structures, communications, and ways of being a bit more from inside the whale and dolphin's perspective and learning about their consciousness. Is a really, really beautiful documentary. And what happened for me during the making of that is that I started hearing more and more specific stories about sound healing with whales and dolphins, which has been a long time interest of mine. But I started gathering actual examples of people experiencing what you just described. Very specific kinds of transformation and healing that happens within their bodies and within their energy bodies, within their consciousness somehow. Like their way of thinking and feeling shifts, and often shifts to a calmer place.
Totally.
And so I started studying that and trying to figure out like what's going on. I come from a background in yoga and meditation. I've been in that field for over 20 years, about 23 years. And so I have a lot of experience with sound healing, with chant and with using all kinds of ancient instruments like tuning forks and sound bowls and gongs to create sound that creates shift in the body. And I'm curious, as you say, about the science, like how does that work? And what I started exploring was how sound impacts us at a cellular level. And mainly sound causes really intense vibration. And especially in water, sound waves are vibrating in the air as they're traveling, but in water, you can see them like ripples. When sound waves touch our body, they touch the water in our body. Inside all of our cells is liquid. And so when you have really intense, concentrated, high frequency sounds, it vibrates the liquid inside your cells and can activate your cells to start functioning differently. It can wake them up because it's like stirring up the contents so that all the little bits of life that make the food and make the energy and regulate within the cells just like start waking up.
Right.
And whales and dolphins have, I don't know how many hundreds of different kinds of sounds that they can make in a sustained, concentrated, focused way. And when we experience that in our bodies, it's transformative. And I too have had experiences like this with singing bowls, right? Where I've gone into a singing bowl session with a really intense headache and feeling really quite yuck in my body. After experiencing that sound, feeling a different peace or calm. And the way that I think about it energetically is that there are certain kinds of sounds that create resonance, that create patterns of harmony and are synchronous and are flowing, instead of patterns of dissonance where things are clashing. So when we're thinking about establishing those patterns of resonance instead of dissonance, it's about learning to move together. How can we create waves that we can all ride and move together, just as the dolphins are moving together in the water? How can we actually recognize that we are all swimming in the same ocean? Like, let's learn to move together instead of like bumping into each other all the time,
100%.
So
Yes.
and it's hard for us to do that through our human brains and egos and differences, perceived differences, and can't talk our way into that. That does not work. What I have experienced is very large groups of humans using sound to come together and to really attune to each other very deeply for the purposes of not only healing, but communicating and making a plan about how they're going to be together. Like one of the most powerful human sound experiences I've had was being with the Samburu tribe, where there were about 80 people, about 60 men and 20 women, who were dancing in a circular way in this dry riverbed in northern Kenya. And they were using their feet to pound the earth at the same rhythm. And then they were repeating this really deep chant. So you can imagine 60 of these very tall men. Voices were so deep. And they were creating this sound current that they were moving with in a spiral and a circle together. And they were coming to agreement about how they were going to be together. They were moving together, like completely in sync. And that feeling creates so much confidence and joy and connection that we need to feel in our bodies. Sound can help us achieve that. And dolphins and whales absolutely use sound in that way. I mean, I think all whales sound, but humpback whale, is the biggest, most known example of like their songs are not only filled with emotion, they're like pure emotion. They're pure sonic connection.
You're speaking to what you experience with this tribe and like the sounds of the dolphins and the whales. And it's also so common, like just within our human world and what I've experienced. When I was on Maui, there were so many of us that would always gather and we would do
Yeah.
kirtan chanting. And that in itself always like created this like beautiful field again of like resonance and connection. And when you're all singing together, it does really create this cohesive energy. And also, I have spent a lot of time doing a lot of work with plant medicine, and music and plant medicine ceremonies is a huge part of the healing. Um, just as much as taking the medicine. Like the songs are directing the healing a lot of times because again, it's frequencies and it's songs and it's tones and specific words and energetic alignments that are happening through the music that are realigning the energies in the physical body and cleaning you of what you don't need. So yeah, it's so amazing that the dolphins and the whales are like the keepers of this wisdom, and it's also being integrated in these other beautiful ways in our world and weaving us all together.
That is very much how my way of understanding has evolved as well. Through all my background in yoga and mantra and kirtan and learning the power of some of the traditional repeated mantras, and experiencing the play of kirtan, how we can all enter a state of like ecstatic joy together.
Totally.
That's hard to do as humans, but singing together and dancing together can do it for sure.
Yes. Yeah, there's this saying, even saying is that like if you go to someone in the village and you're depressed, they're going to bring you to the shaman. And the first thing the shaman asks you is, when did you stop dancing and singing?
Yeah, that's really why I started turning all of my poetry work into music, because music and singing through my voice is so much more powerful than just speaking it. And that's been a beautiful thing to explore when I'm creating songs for healing, for
Mhm.
meditation, to guide people into a deeper state of love and connection and understanding,
Mm.
just as we're speaking to.
Yeah, I feel like through our voice, obviously, we are giving an energetic transmission and channeling this information from these other realms and transmitting it through whether it's sound or it's like information that we're channeling or frequency, you
Teaching, the
know?
teaching, yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
powerful.
yeah. And that really was what I learned too in your dolphin light body activation course, was about moving energetic frequency. One of the
Mm.
things that we focused on in that course that was so transformational to me was the energetic practices that you taught us, about how to draw energy up through a cone shape in the lower body.
Hmm.
And that was a practice that I had been engaging with for many years. That's my primary way of how I draw energy up from the earth, in my practice. However, when you taught it, that information like kicked in my body at a very different level, and it really transformed my ability to draw in more energy more effectively. And that was powerful. And we talked about moving energy in our bodies in different rotational planes, and
Hmm.
it just makes me more aware of how to be in my body in a more embodied way, where I have more sense of my proprioception and my movement and being able to articulate different parts of the body. And that is a very dolphin quality, because they're so hyper aware of their bodies. Like dolphins will swim next to you super happily, like this far from you. But the moment you move this much, they'll like constantly stay 1 inch from you. They're so precise in how they can move their bodies and so aware. As an embodiment practice, it's really brilliant to learn from them and to be underwater with them. And that's why I'm excited that this year coming up, 2025, I'm going to be guiding my first dolphin retreat at a retreat center that I spent time at in 2023. It's called Wild Quest on the tiny island of Bimini in the Bahamas. And that will be an opportunity to spend 5 days on and in the water with Atlantic spotted dolphins and bottlenose dolphins. And I've had that experience, spent a week there before, and it was absolutely transformational in the way that I understand like my body, mind, spirit connection, not as a concept, but how I can actually like feel it and relate to it in my body after
Right.
doing it. Does that make
Yeah.
sense to you?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I feel like they are beings who are so deeply connected to these higher realms of consciousness. Like I really see dolphins as like these galactic beings that are in
Mhm.
the ocean, like holding these codes that are so connected, yes, to the earth, but also the celestial realms. And so I feel like that also kind of gets reorganized within us, like that connection to the soul and also like the body and the integration of those higher energies. And that's also why I was so excited to bring them in the light body course because
Yeah.
before I had just done light body activation, but bringing the dolphins is in, I feel like made it such a different experience because
Yeah.
they just have such a high frequency and
I agree. Do you want me to speak more to that galactic side of them?
go for it. Let's let's go in.
Yeah. I definitely have experienced the whales and dolphins as being ultra connected to the cosmos, um, each in their own way. You know, in my studies of humpback whale song, there are theories, new and ancient, suggesting that the humpback whale songs alter in part in response to the northern lights, that the whales might be singing some sort of deeper energetic light slash magnetic frequency of the planet. We know scientifically that the whales form a net of sound and song that crosses through the oceans, their weaves like this. That's how they're contacting each other across the oceans. Their songs are flowing, in some cases, thousands of miles across quiet oceans and forming this web of sound and frequency and vibration. That's a big deal.
Like a
And it,
sound healing for the whole planet.
exactly, but there's so many fewer of them now, right?
Right.
Millions of them died in the past 400 years. So that's also potentially a problem, you know? And that net of sound is very much like the way that leading edge scientists are thinking about the relationships between cosmic bodies in our universe. You know, we're an interweaving flow of sound frequency in our cosmos. And scientists are thinking about and studying more about sound now than they are about light when it comes to the cosmos. They're starting to study more about sound instead of only
Mm.
focusing on light, only focusing on vision. And that is a quality that all whales and dolphins have, is that their sound world is much richer and more important than their visual world. And for humans, we're so eye focused. We call it eyewitness. We call it seeing eye. Like everything is about the eye, because sharing a
Mm.
vision is like the only thing we can maybe get close to sharing. Like you and I can maybe look at and see the same thing. I think we're
Hmm.
less likely to hear the same thing. We're less likely to remember the same thing. But like as humans, we agree that seeing is really important. Seeing is believing. They were
Is
so
it?
vision focused. Yeah, exactly. But that's something I'm thinking about for whales too, is that for them, it's about hearing.
Hmm.
And so what can we learn when we attune more to our hearing and to our relationships of sound frequency, like we were just saying, you know, as it relates to healing and connection, communication. Yeah. And then so for the galactic, you know, understanding of that, there, as you said earlier in the conversation, dolphins are operating at a higher frequency. And I mean that literally and energetically and
Hmm.
figuratively. Like when
Hmm.
you're with them, you can feel coming from their big heads like a cone-shaped energetic frequency that's
Hmm.
attuned to the sky. And they're all attuned to each other. When you think about the heads of different whales, I mean, the sperm whale is literally, its head is a giant dish. It's filled with the world's biggest brain. So it's got this bone-shaped listening dish that its brain sits in. And it sleeps with that listening dish attuned to the sky. And the entire pod will sleep vertically with their heads pointed in exactly the same direction. And that's how they sleep. And they are listening and literally basking in the frequencies of the cosmos in this big listening dish. Dolphins do it differently. Humpback whales do it differently. But for many years in my connections and explorations of dolphin and whale consciousness, they have shown me that they are galactic in nature, that their understanding and feeling, the way they feel the universe, the way they feel their experience goes out
Hmm.
into the cosmos. I also feel my experience that way. So I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, that's
It
why we
teaches
connect
me,
with them.
yeah, and it teaches me how to do that more effectively and how to connect with them there and how to connect with other energies related to the cosmic flow of energy that's passing through and around our earth at all time. Like that's part of our world. And I want to understand that too, and they're part of that. And I've also uncovered through my studies lots of different indigenous explanations of why that's the case. That whales were the first seeded conscious beings of our planet because when consciousness came to planet Earth, it was millions of years ago, and humans were not yet ready. We didn't have equipment that was capable. It took
Mm.
us so much longer to evolve brains and bodies that could hold consciousness. But consciousness was entrusted to the whales and dolphins until humans were ready. And so
It-
that now they're there as ancient wisdom keepers, mentors, teachers, guides, um, however you choose to relate to them. If you want to listen to their teachings, I do believe that it's very clear they're trying to talk to us.
yes, I agree with that.
So with all that you've learned from the dolphins, Danny, like how long has that been going on? When did you first start establishing a relationship with them?
I love this question so much. And my first connection with a dolphin actually was when I was in Mexico, my freshman year in college. Um, but at that time, I didn't fully understand. Like I wasn't like open to fully receive their energies. And I think that's something that is important. Like we have to be conscious and aware of, like what they're capable of teaching us and be open to receiving that. But in 2019, I went to the Big Island. And at this point in my life, actually, this is also where I'm at again now, but I was nomadic. And I remember it was a full moon and maybe it was a super mo moon. There was something significant about the moon. And I was calling in my next home. And after that evening, the next day, I went and I swam with a pod of dolphins for the first time. And as I spoke to earlier, they speak in telepathy, and most animals actually speak in images. They'll send us images, or we can send them images. Um, and I started like seeing these images of myself living in Hawaii, and the dolphins were saying to me, "Your home is in Hawaii, and you're gonna live here. You're gonna come back, and you're gonna live here." And I was like, wow, okay. And that's not what I had expected. I had no intention of living in Hawaii at that point in time in my life. I hadn't considered it. And so I left the Big Island. The retreat was over. And I think about, gosh, it was probably 9 months later, I ended up moving to Maui, which was also interesting because I thought I would be moving to the Big Island. Um, but I just ended up on Maui. That's just how God had it planned out. And I think I was only there for like a week when I started receiving the dolphins in my dream time. And yeah, I was almost like having lucid dreams where they would come in. And it always felt like an invitation to come swim with them. Like when that would happen, I would know like, oh, I need to get up and I need to go to the bay and be with them. And so I would, and every time that would happen, they would be there. And yeah, it just evolved from there. I just continued to nourish that connection. And yeah, I just feel to share this again to um, just really emphasize how we can connect with these creatures and these beings in really powerful ways. And yeah, how important it is to listen.
And it's really interesting too that it seems, I mean, it's been my exact experience. You and I met on Maui, right? Um, there are so many dolphin people who have been called to Maui at this
Totally.
time. Like, it's a
Yeah.
complete gathering of dolphin people who are
Yeah.
there to like, hey, we're trying to figure this out. We're trying to be with them. We're trying to talk to them. We're trying to listen to them. What are you experiencing? And that's, that's been a long part of our friendship and exploration together.
Yeah.
And so I actually have another dolphin friend who's a studier of consciousness and healing and a really advanced body worker and energy worker. And recently, when I was there with him on Maui, he handed me this book, and it's called The Healer's Handbook, A Journey into Hyperspace. It's by an author named Stuart Swerdlow, and it's actually a dictionary, Danny, of image transmissions associated with like their equivalent meaning. And
Uh-huh.
it's meant to be an exploration of trying to understand that exact picture language that you just spoke to. And this roughly correlates to what sound scientists are learning about dolphin language. Scientists in the Bahamas that have been studying the same pods for about 20 years now have mapped out approximately 60,000 words or repeat usable sounds in the dolphin's language, including, as you spoke to earlier, individual names. And there's longtime observations by scientists that um, and dolphin behavior trainers that dolphins, when a new calf is born, during the time of the birth, the pod gets very, very quiet. And the pod stays quiet while the young one is born and in the few hours thereafter. And the mother does a ton of sound communication during that time. And they believe that the baby is imprinting on the mother's voice and sound and signature call. And that may actually also be the time when the baby is receiving its name whistle.
Oh, wow. That's so precious.
The other pod members stay quiet until that seems to be complete. And then after a period of a few hours, they resume their normal communication.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. I want to speak a little bit about the codes that I feel like the dolphins hold because I feel
Please.
like that's something I'm so interested in and have received so much from. And yeah, well, one of them we already talked about, like them being the keepers from my perspective of the light body frequencies. And the other one is the frequencies of joy and the inner child. And I feel like when I started connecting with dolphins, I mean like you even just think about it, like if you watch a dolphin like flipping out of the water or you even hear their squeaks, like it's impossible not to smile and feel happy and like giggle a little bit. Like they're just so adorable. And I feel that returning to our joy and following our joy is so important right now on the planet, holding those codes of joy when there is a lot of hopelessness and helplessness, and being able to, yeah, like lift the field of consciousness wherever we are going, like with that joy embodied. And I feel like dolphins are such beautiful expressions of that. And yeah, again, like healing for the inner child, like this like unconditionally loving energy of the heart that is also so playful and just like kind of like tickles you, and brings you back to that purity of essence that we have always been, but the space that so many of us have forgotten. Yeah, I feel like that's a big part of their code.
Well, you really, really communicated that as a teacher in the light body course because I literally drew like a silly picture of a dolphin, and the mantra,
Oh,
what the dolphin is saying is pleasure, play, pleasure, play, pleasure, play, pleasure,
yes.
play. On repeat, that's it, as though they just become one word.
I love that. Yeah,
And
and
and that's what they're all about, right? They're playing when they're feeding, when they're eating, when they're mating, when they're nursing, when they're doing everything. They're playing, and they're so
yeah.
filled with actual joy.
Yes, I'm so glad you just read that pleasure, play, because that's another key piece is like the innocence that they hold within their pleasure is
Mhm.
so beautiful. And that's also a key code that I feel needs to be restored within humanity is the innocence around pleasure and our sexuality, because they
Yeah,
really are so free and liberated within that. And there's
yeah.
not any sort of like distortion or objectification around it. And also in their play, and just like this reminder to invite more play and pleasure into our lives, and how if we did that, like we could get so much farther so much faster rather than like trying to work so hard and
I'll
push,
tell you
but
what,
like,
I mean, my very direct experience with that is swimming in the pods with the pods in Bimini was when pods of two species came together. When the spotted dolphins met the bottlenose dolphins, there was immediate sexual energy. They began to just do this incredibly lively dance of pursuing each other and mating in complete play between the
uh-huh,
species
yeah,
as a way of learning about each other, expressing affection, establishing connection, playing. They were just following the very, as you say, innocent natural instincts of their animal bodies. And it was the way that they learned about each other and the way that they established harmony. And the ones that wanted to participate did, and the ones that didn't. And it was very exciting to be part of. But it also made me realize, as you say, like again, learning from them and learning with them, it made me realize like, whoa, we have a lot of restrictions on our sexual
a
expression.
lot of conditioning. Yeah,
So many rules. Yeah, and that's sad. That's really sad to me. So
it is. And I really
yeah,
feel it's because I mean, like our sexual energy is the same as our life force energy. And through the cultivation of our life force energy, it gives us the ability to create what we need to in our lives and on the
the
earth
other thing.
plane.
Yeah.
And when that is cut off, when we don't know our power anymore, when we don't know we're a creator anymore, when our energy is like leaking to other things, like we are then being conditioned and falling into these traps within the matrix rather than creating our reality, like using our energy to create, you know?
Yeah, and I feel I mean, from my speaking only from my personal experience, that's what depression feels like for me, is being severed from
Totally.
my creative energy.
Yeah. And cut off from source.
Plain and simple.
Yeah.
And I did spend periods of my life cut off from my creative energy because of the rules of what I had to be doing at that time. And that's true for so many of us. Like, why is depression a newer, bigger, scarier, more dangerous problem? It's because of
Hmm.
the way that we're restricting how and who we are in the world and restricting the ways that we connect and becoming more isolated. We're working in charge of our brains, listening to some external authority of force, training us and telling us
Hmm.
what to do instead of following our natural ways of being. Talking about the whale raised wild versus the whale raised in captivity. The same is true for us. We're in captivity, clearly. And I have lived in the wild. I have had chances to be in the wild, in the water with whales for extended times, living in the bush across Africa for months at a time. And living in the wild is so much more joyful and so much more free. And so that's what I want to learn from the animals most of all is how can we embrace wilder ways that make us kinder to ourselves, to others, to the natural world, that make us more connected, that make us more loving. Like I know that that is possible if we put our attention there.
I would agree. Yeah. And it's important that we make an effort to do that. And I
Mhm.
can just relate from the time that I most recently spent in the Amazon and coming out, like you just feel so clean and clear within yourself because you've just spent all of this time without these influences from the external world and you're so deeply connected to your own channel, you know? And yeah, spending time in nature is so important again for what we talked about, like with the dolphins and the whales, like attuning to this frequency of like resonance of nature. And I feel like there's so many influences in our world that are interfering with that. So spending time, whether it's in the ocean or you're in the forest or, you know, like wherever you can get to in nature, just to come back into alignment and connection with nature because you are nature and that's coming home to yourself, you know?
Totally. And that's one more, I mean, it's one more thing relating back to sound that even listening to the songs of whales and dolphins, listening to their sounds, there's so many incredible recordings of whale and dolphin sound available on every streaming platform. You can find it anywhere. But listening to it is transformative. And it has also being in wild nature for extended periods and being in sound space with the whales and dolphins has made me aware of how chaotic and noisy our human world is
Totally, yes.
and how
100%
hard that is
agree.
on our bodies and our brains
Yeah. It's
to sleep,
interference.
to rest, you know, the sirens, the bells, the whistles, the notifications, the like the just machine noise, the garbage truck noise. Like our world is really chaotic. And over the past few years for work, you know, I'll go out onto an island
Mhm.
where there's no humans within, you know, a huge distance and no lights. And then the next month I'll be in New York City to perform.
So different.
And hearing and experiencing what happens in my body when that's the case, you know,
Yeah.
it's a big deal. But it's also the reason that I have dedicated so much time to creating music that counters that.
Mhm.
So in my music, both, you know, I have an album called Listen Deep that has several tracks that are related to exploring the consciousness and the sound waves of whales and dolphins. There's a track called The Descent that is like guidance for how to listen with our whole body. And it's like guiding you on an underwater journey.
Mhm.
There's a track called Ocean Souls that's about meeting the consciousness of the humpback whale underwater and what could happen on our earth if we were to ever lose them. Um, so using sound and music as a way to translate the emotion and the meaning underlying those words, and again, using the power of my voice to communicate it, not just through the words, but through the way that I'm speaking it. I've learned so much from the whales and the dolphins in that too. And when I'm in the water with them, I'm constantly trying to make sounds. I've sung to the whales in the water. Um, when I'm underwater with dolphins, I can't help myself, but I just constantly try to make squeaks and sounds and clicks just to get their attention. Do you make noise to them, or is that just me?
I don't think I do.
Yeah,
I feel like when I'm with the dolphins, I become so silent within that I don't even think about making noise
yeah,
personally.
yeah. I've been wanting to talk to animals since I was a little child. So far the best I can get is listen to them pretty well and
Uh-huh.
understand their experience. I've gotten pretty good at that through all my study of wild animal behavior and just really learning how they listen with their
Yeah.
full bodies and how it's a life or death thing for them, you know.
Yeah.
It's also a pleasure thing for them. They also really like certain kinds of sound and will make certain kinds of sound to woo each other and to sing to each other and to play and just to hear
Uh-huh.
themselves. And, you know, again, very similar to humans. It's part of their way that they love each other for sure. And it's also part of the way that they play. And I relate to that in making music too. So I appreciate that.
I love that you shared that you've always wanted to communicate with them and your first step has been just like listening really deeply. Because I feel like that's something that's so important right now on our planet too, is remembering how to listen to the earth and to the animals and to really take what they're sharing to heart and to integrate that into our daily lives, whatever the teaching is, because they have so much deep wisdom that we really need right now on the planet.
Yeah. How can we learn to listen to the earth more deeply? How can we learn to be with her better? How can we learn to take care of her and to love her the way that she needs so that she can love and sustain us? Like we depend on that.
I really feel like that's what the divine feminine, that's a big part of our journey, is to be that channel and that connection to the earth and her creatures, and to be transmitting that and transferring that and communicating that to the rest of the world, especially with those who are more cut off from that connection within themselves, like being that remembrance and that guide. So I love that you're sharing that work. And yeah, for anyone who's interested in connecting with Amber's music, poetry, social media, all of that will also be in the bio for this episode. So you can find all the links.
Thank you, Danny. This has been such an awesome conversation, and I'm really glad you and I got to exchange our current understanding of so many different parts of our work and wisdom. It's always a pleasure to share that with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I've loved this conversation.
Yeah, super fun. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Embracing the Mystery, and I hope you enjoyed. To stay connected, you can follow me on Instagram at Danny M. Rem, or follow and like my Facebook business page, Danny Rem Embracing the Mystery, where I share weekly live channelings, guided meditations, and content to help empower you to live an authentic and embodied soul-led life. You can also find the links to this information in the bio of this episode. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoyed.